Please help to elect Bernie Sanders for president by sharing this video and doing everything else you can to get the word still an option. You have options which you might not even know you have. In this video, I hope to help you see some of them. I also encourage you to think beyond what I tell you and to explore your options, both for your own sake and for the sake of other people. If you live in one of the states with so-called sore loser laws, keep in mind that those laws generally do not apply to presidential, but more importantly, that Bernie Sanders, in fact, did not lose, as many people know and have been likely trying to tell you, and as I hope to firmly establish within this video. The idea of applying sore loser laws to Bernie Sanders is ridiculous. He also has not quit, although it may look that way superficially due to his attempts to help the powerful Democratic Party defeat a candidate he feels is worse than the one they chose before campaigning even started to have listed on the ballot as their selection, by any means necessary. Keep in mind that until we stand together and fight to elect him, he has valid reasons to think he's more likely to remain in the Senate than to get elected president, all things considered. And whether Bernie gets elected president or not, the progressive platform which he worked so hard to get the Democratic Party to adopt is very likely worth his efforts to protect it and to ensure that they'll stick to it, as much as he and we can manage to get them to. On October 14th, 2016, Bernie Sanders spoke on a stage in a parking lot in Los Angeles to a large group of people in support of California's Proposition 61, which is intended to help make prescription medication more affordable. As he approached the crowd, which the stage he was to speak from was on the other side of, I had the opportunity to tell him that I'm one of California's candidates for presidential elector, to vote for him in the Electoral College if he wins in the state of California as a write-in candidate for president. Bernie Sanders expressed his approval and his gratitude in words, of course, but even more so in his facial expression. As far as I know at this time, unfortunately, I don't think that was caught on video. However, in a conversation he had shortly later that day on the set of Real Time with Bill Maher, as you can see in the following video clip shown here under fair use for commentary, he does address the question of whether he would rather be campaigning all over this country for president.
Bernie Sanders, look at that. The love people have for you is so personal. You must feel that, right?
I do.
Do you miss it on the campaign trail?
Yeah. And if your real question is, would I have preferred not to have the time to be with you tonight, to be campaigning all over this country and running for president? The answer is yes. I wish
know you would. So what are you doing these days?
Well, I just wrote a book.
Really?
And right here, I'm now on the West Coast in order to see and help the people of California pass Proposition 61 so that we can begin to take on the pharmaceutical industry who are ripping off the American people every single day.
What does 61 say?
What 61 says is that the state agencies in California should not pay anything more for prescription drugs than the Veterans Administration, which pays the lowest prices in the country.
And isn't this really the key to getting single payer anytime in this country? I mean, they tried single payer in your state of Vermont, and it couldn't work because until you cap how much the gougers can charge, the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals, we're going to have more EpiPens and more Martin Shkreli's.
Well, look, the drug industry, and I have to say this, you got 1 out of 5 people now who, when they get a prescription from a doctor, they can't even afford to buy that prescription because the
Right.
prices are so high. You got elderly people in Vermont, they're cutting their pills in half because they can't afford the medicine. People are dying in this country and they're getting sick because they can't afford the medicine. And these guys in the pharmaceutical industry, in my humble opinion, are crooks. They made the top five companies last year, Bill, made $50 billion in profit. CEOs rake in enormous compensation packages, and yet people can't afford the medicine they need. That's not the way it's
So
made.
what we have to do is cap how much people should charge, right?
Yeah.
I mean that.
Well, what you have to do is what every other major country on earth does.
Right.
That is negotiate prices. And what we have now, the pharmaceutical industry has 1,400 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. They have spent $1 billion or $3 billion since 1988 just on lobbying. All right, these guys have enormous power. They own the political parties. And what we have got to do is the American people say, enough is enough. We are going to control your prices. We're going to negotiate prices with you. Back in the 1990s, I took a busload of women from the state of Vermont to Montreal, Canada, to buy
Billy Bush?
not quite, to buy prescription drugs for breast cancer. Back then, they paid 1/10 the price that they were paying here in the United States for breast cancer. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
We pay the highest prices in the world for our medicine. We got to deal with those
But
issues.
don't you think that capping the prices may hurt innovation and new drugs coming in?
That's what
bullshit, right?
It is bullshit.
That's
They spend far more
Yes,
money.
that is what
They spend far more. Give you an example. Innovation money. They're spending, as I understand it, $100 million right here in California to beat this proposition. $100 million. Last year, the CEOs of the top 10 companies made over $300 million. They made $50 billion in profit. They spend a lot more in marketing and advertising than they do in research development.
Of course, Bernie's answer to that question is that yes, in fact, he would rather be campaigning all over this country for his own presidential candidacy. It is also a fact that Bernie Sanders actually was nominated at the Democratic National Convention, as you can see in the video clip shown here, under fair use doctrine of copyright laws.
On behalf of millions inspired by Aloha, determined to seek a future rooted in love, compassion, and justice for all, and dedicated to a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, I am truly honored to nominate Bernie Sanders for President of the United States.
Also, it was Bernie who moved to select his political opponent as the nominee for the Democratic Party to list on the ballot, since the powerful Democratic-Republican Party establishment was obviously in support of electing that candidate, whatever it takes, regardless of whether the people like it or not. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, Bernie did not actually lose, and he has not shown any signs of being sore about not having been selected as the nominee that the Democratic Party had decided before the primary election season had even started to list as their candidate in November on the general election ballot. So if you're still hearing that Bernie can't win as a write-in candidate because of sore loser laws in your state or in any other state, call out that lie for what it is and tell people to get it out of their heads. Stand with us and fight for what's right instead of just accepting what's wrong. Note that Bernie did not move to nominate his political opponent by acclamation, as was later claimed by party officials, but rather to retain his delegates and his delegate votes, to pause or suspend the procedural rules so that he would remain an option for the Democratic Party in case the establishment changed its mind, or in case his opponent might eventually decide to step aside in favor of allowing the Democratic Party to select the candidate who has consistently shown in the polls that he could easily defeat the Republican Party's selected candidate. Let's have a look at exactly what Bernie said in another clip shown here under fair use.
It is now my honor to present our Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I move that the convention suspend the procedural rules. I move that all votes cast by delegates be reflected in the official record. And I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
In my opinion, Bernie had obviously been previously instructed to nominate his opponent by acclamation and refused to do so, for whatever reason he may have had. Here, also shown under the fair use doctrine, is a brief video clip showing the false claim made shortly afterward, as Bernie and his wife left to exit the building, by DNC Chair Marcia Fudge, who apparently either didn't care what Bernie Sanders had actually said, or didn't listen, or both.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders has moved in the spirit of unity to suspend the rules. To suspend the rules and nominate Hillary Clinton by acclamation as the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party.
With the procedural rules suspended, and with Bernie's delegates and delegate votes recorded and retained, the Democratic Party should still have the option to change which nominee they have represent them as their selected candidate on the general election ballot, up until such time as it becomes legally or effectively too late for such an intelligent move on their part. Personally, I would rather elect Bernie Sanders as an independent candidate for president, giving the power of the presidency to the people for a change. But the Democratic-Republican establishment still has the option at this point to treat our nominee as their idea and take at least part of the credit for electing Bernie Sanders as president. If they wish the president that we elect to be affiliated with them in some way, and can see that their previous selection is not likely to be chosen as president by the people of the United States of America, supporting Bernie would be the intelligent thing to do. Every day, people tell me that they plan to vote for Bernie Sanders for president, whether they believe that vote will be counted or not. And every day, other people tell me they wish voting for Bernie was an option, but they've somehow gotten the impression that he's not running and doesn't want the job. We need to dispel that myth. Bernie has a huge support base, and he has indicated that he wishes to serve us as the President of the United States. He's been doing what seems necessary to protect the progressive Democratic Party platform, which he worked so hard to convince the powerful Democratic Party to adopt. And of course, as he has expressed, he feels that it would be better to elect the Democratic Party's selected candidate than to allow the election of a presidential candidate who flaunts bigotry and prejudice. The underlying assumption, of course, is that those are the only two choices we have, which, of course, is not at all true, but which, understandably, is hard to distinguish from fact if too many people believe such an assumption and vote for one of those two candidates as an intended vote against the other. But I'm here to point out that is not a fact, it's a lie. We do have other choices. At least one very good choice in Bernie Sanders. And of course, there are other candidates as well, which each have the honest support of many people who see them as good choices also. We certainly have choices which are better options than to vote for the lesser of two evils. A lesser evil vote is no more a vote against the greater of those two evils than it is a vote against every good candidate, including the best candidate, whoever you believe that to be. Many people have begun to understand this fact and are not willing to help elect evil, even if it is the lesser of two evils. Presenting a terrible choice as your alternative in order to get you to embrace a bad choice is a nasty and dirty trick, which those involved should be deeply ashamed of. Those who see no good choice in an election should really be allowed to vote directly against the worst choice, rather than having to vote for whoever they've been convinced through some false dichotomy lie is the only available candidate who can possibly beat the supposedly worse one. Unfortunately, we don't have the option to cast such an anti-vote and have it counted as such. However, we do have better choices who, in fact, can defeat the bad choices with our help if enough voters get out there and vote for whoever they think is really the best, rather than giving up as the supporters of the worst choices want them to do. Strong Bernie supporters, and of course potential Bernie electors and elector alternates, please join me in campaigning on behalf of Bernie Sanders for president by making your own campaign video or videos and posting them online for people to share. As a candidate for presidential elector, I'm attempting to provide a service for which I have no expectation of recognition nor of compensation. This service is offered as a gift by myself and others like me. Of course, that doesn't mean we can't campaign in at least some sense. This commentary is meant to be a part of that campaign, to encourage people to write in Bernard Sanders for president on the general election ballot in all states where people who see Bernie as the best choice can find a way to do so, and especially here in California, so that this state can send its 55 electors for Bernard Sanders to the Electoral College to join electors from other states in officially electing Bernie Sanders as the President of the United States of America. He is, in my opinion, the best candidate for the job, and I hope that other people in California and elsewhere will join me in campaigning on behalf of the American people to elect Bernie Sanders for president of this great nation, and of course, also in writing him in on the general election ballot in their state for the 2016 presidential election here in these United States of America. Wish I had a video of Bernie's immediate reaction when I told him that I was one of his candidates for presidential elector for him as a write-in candidate to vote for him in the general election on behalf of the people of California, but unfortunately I do not. So instead, let's have another look at what he told Bill Maher not long afterward.
Yeah. And if your real question is, would I have preferred not to have the time to be with you tonight, to be campaigning all over this country and running for president? The answer is yes. I wish I were.
What can I say? Priceless. Thank you, Bernie. And thanks everyone who has watched this video. I'm Donald Kronos, promoting Bernie Sanders for president, and I put a lot of time into this message.